Thank you, Jim, for not leading the song, I Close My Eyes, right before the sermon. You guys have heard those jokes before, right? Like the worst songs to lead before the sermon. That's one of them, I Close My Eyes, because... All right. How close do you feel to one another in this room? The Bible's expectation that it has for us as Christians is that we would have brotherly affection for one another, like 2 Peter chapter 1 says. There's many passages in the New Testament that use the phrase one another. People have written books on one anothering. The idea that we're supposed to function as a family unit. I believe that of all the churches I've been to, this is a church that does better than average on having a sense of community. But I think this is also one of those kinds of things that if we give attention to, we can get better with it. There's always room for improvement in this area. And the theme passage that has been selected for the year, this Ephesians 4:11-16, this text doesn't use the phrase one another in it. But there are ideas of one anothering all throughout it, like where the preachers, evangelists, shepherds, all of these people are supposed to equip the saints for the work of ministry, that there's a sense in which we're supposed to be equipping one another to know how to serve the Lord and serve one another more effectively. In Ephesians 4:11, it also talks about building up the body of Christ, that we're supposed to be built up and strengthened, which requires one anothering. There's also this idea of the unity of the faith in Ephesians 4:13, that we're supposed to be unified in the things that Jesus has left us to understand and to know. Verse 16 of this passage talks about each part working properly. That we've all figured out, in the body of Christ, am I a hand, am I a toenail, am I an eyelash, am I an ear, what am I? And we're going to figure out how to cohesively work together for the Lord. Now, what I want to do, beginning this morning, is start a series of lessons that we'll look at once a month on these ideas of one anothering. We're eventually, Lord willing, going to look at some things more specifically in this Ephesians 4 passage. But the way that I want to introduce this series is by looking at the book of Proverbs, because pretty much everything else we're going to look at is going to come from the New Testament. But the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about friendship, and you're not going to see the phrase one another like you see it all over the New Testament, but you have foundational concepts in the book of Proverbs that will help create some building blocks that we'll work with from, Lord willing, once a month. And so in this lesson, I want us to look at what the book of Proverbs says about being friends with people. In Proverbs, it's not always going to be the word friend that you're going to see. Sometimes it's going to be neighbor. Sometimes it's going to be companion. Things like that. But all of these are sort of communicating the same concepts. And so we're going to stick mainly in the book of Proverbs this morning to introduce this series. And I want to, from the book of Proverbs, look at these three things. Number one, the power of friendship. Number two, the core of friendship. And number three, the foundations of friendship. So friendship is a powerful thing in our life. What is the core to defining what a friend is or what friendship involves? And then what are the foundations that create godly, biblical kinds of relationships? And that's what we're going to use to start this series. And then, Lord willing, from there, we'll look at some more things specifically in Ephesians 4 for the base text for the year. Let's go ahead and start out with this first point, the power of friendship. I think all of us, if we're really honest, would acknowledge that we are all products of the people that have been the biggest influences on our life. That none of us are totally, completely self-made people, that we've allowed certain people to influence us, whether it's people that we've listened to or read, or people that we personally know and draw near to. Friendship has got the power to do all kinds of things in our life. Look at Proverbs 12:26 in the NIV. If you have the ESV, there's a marginal footnote that says basically what the NIV says, because there's two ways to translate this verse. But Proverbs 12:26 says, The righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. If you're a righteous person, you will give careful thought to how you choose your friends. Why would a righteous person choose their friends using wisdom, being careful about it? Well, it's because friendship is a powerful thing that can be used for good or bad. It's like dynamite can be used for good or bad, or technology can be used for good or bad, but all of those things are powerful things. Friendship is like that. So in the book of Proverbs, how are they used as an influence for good or bad? Let's start out with how they can be an influence for bad. Look at Proverbs 13, verse 20, the second half of this verse. We'll look at the first half in just a moment. But it says, the companion of fools will suffer harm. Can you start to see why righteous people would be careful about the friends that they choose? Because if you become the companion of fools, you can't keep yourself distant from their foolishness forever. You're eventually going to suffer harm because of their foolishness. Well, why would that be the case? Have you ever been a companion of a fool and they actually hurt you, like directly? They did something or said something that hurt you. Maybe you draw near to foolish people and people start to associate you with that person. And so even though you've been trying to be different, people aren't going to cut you any slack or give you the benefit of the doubt, and your reputation has been harmed. Maybe the companion of fools would suffer harm because they would succumb to peer pressure. All of your friends are telling you to do things that you shouldn't be doing, and you end up going ahead and doing those things, and it wasn't good for you. So there's one passage on that. Look at another passage that deals with this same kind of idea. Proverbs 22, verses 24 and 25. Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. I don't think this passage is saying that we shouldn't seek to positively influence somebody who struggles with anger. I think the idea is that you don't draw near like you're a buddy to this person, entrusting deep, dark secrets or things that you're not going to become really vulnerable with somebody like this. Don't draw near in those kinds of ways to somebody who's always flying off the handle. Have you ever seen this happen before? Where there was somebody who didn't struggle with outbursts of wrath and kicking things and punching things, but then they started hanging out with somebody like that, and that person started to become much different. There are some things that are better caught than taught. Have you ever heard that phrase before? That it's not like this person that started to learn how to get angry read some books on how to be angry. No, they caught it by the influence of this person in their life that wasn't good for them. They started hanging out with people with a short fuse. They started hanging out with people that were violent towards others. And then you start to learn those things and you get entangled in a snare. What kind of snares would angry people get ensnared in? You say wrathful words and you can never walk it back. You punch a wall and now you have to pay for it to be fixed. You're throwing things across the house, whatever, ruining things. There's all kinds of snares that you can get caught. You could lose your job because of this kind of thing. And so don't draw near to people like that lest you learn their way. So you see how friendship can be used for bad. But on the positive side of this, how can it be used as a very good thing in your life? It's not all bad. We just have to be careful in how we choose our friends. And if we are, those people can make a tremendous impact in our life for good. The second half of Proverbs 13:20 says this: whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. Have you ever been around somebody who was wise? And you took mental note of how they treated maybe a bad waitress or a waiter at a restaurant. You just took mental notes on how they did that. Maybe you went to go buy a used car with somebody who was wise, and you learned how they did those things. Maybe you had a conversation with another person, and it was you and that wise person, and you kind of observed how they handled the discussion and the direction of everything. Are you the kind of person that takes mental notes? and you want to be around wise people. And the text says that you're walking with wise people. We're going down the same path in life. I'll say more about that in a little bit. I'll use this passage again to make another point. But here's another passage that deals with the same idea. Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Imagine that you had two axes, and the only thing you had to sharpen both axes was the other axe. And so you start taking the axe, and you have to hit it against each other. You have to be really careful so you don't create an accident. So you keep doing that over and over again, and the process of doing, sorry, that was really bad, but the process of doing that would make both of the axes something that they would not have been without each other. You want to know one of the ways that you've got a friend that's a good friend? Is you can both mutually say, we make a good team. The first time I ever went to church after I was converted, I was baptized April 3rd, 2008 on a Thursday. And then I went to church that Sunday night. And the first sermon I ever heard preached was from Rick Lanning. And he was preaching on Proverbs 27:17 about iron sharpening iron, and we need to be close to each other. We need to draw near to each other. Do you think the process of iron sharpening iron is going to be always really peaceful and no, there's going to be some friction at times, but in that process, you're making each other something that you never could have been before. Have you ever had a friend like that? Who stuck with you, who was with you in difficulties, who said things to you that you needed to hear, and sometimes it felt a little abrasive, but you know that it was coming from a place of love, and had you not had that person in your life, you would not be what you are today. The power that friendship has is to make you wise, to make you a sharper person, to make you morally more what you ought to be, to give you penetrating insight on how the world really works. All right, so if that's how powerful friendship can be in our life, let's ask the question, what is the core of friendship? If you were to define what friendship is, how would you define it? This is one of those things, at least in my mind, that I think I know what a friend is, what it means, but if somebody was to say, hey, define friendship for me, I don't know that I would be able to actually define it because I just kind of feel like I already know what it is, but I've never tried to figure out how to articulate it. Let's think about some things in Proverbs that would help us with this, but just think, before we look at some other passages, how do guys talk about their friends? I got a hunting buddy. I got a fishing buddy. I got a truck guy. I have another guy that's got a beard. I got my friends that have all of these things, and it's always a buddy that does this or that, or we share these things in common. Why is it so often that young moms become close to each other? Because they're battling in the trenches in the same way. And so friendships are cultivated by having some kind of a shared interest. If you don't have something in common that you're both striving for, it's going to be really hard to draw near to somebody. It's like the phrase, birds of a feather flock together. If there's somebody that always complains that they don't have a friend and they just want a friend, but they don't have anything that they're pursuing, are they going to be really great friends with anybody if there's not anything that they're interested in or pursuing or seeking to have something in common with somebody? Look at what, again, Proverbs 13:20 says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. What is the shared interest that these people have in this passage? I care about wisdom. I care about wisdom. We both want to walk in that same path together. And that's what allows us to flock together, is because we have these things in common. We both care about these things. And that's why we have something we can talk about. Do you remember in Acts 4, when Peter and John were at the temple, and they were given a strong warning that we don't want to hear you preaching and teaching about Jesus anymore? I love what Acts 4:23 says. When they were released, they went to their friends and reported what the chief priests and the elders had said to them. And this is when they all pray together, and the place in which they were was shaken, and they go out to continue to preach and teach with all boldness, so that in chapter 5, even the religious leaders are saying, "You've filled all Jerusalem with this knowledge of Jesus." These people are conferring with one another, and they pray together. Why? Because they share the Lord together. If we share in the Lord together, we share in the same hopes and dreams and longings and mission in life, we should be able, theoretically, to be really close to one another. It doesn't mean that we're all equally going to be as close to each other, but we all have something deeply in common. Have you ever traveled to another part of the country and spent time with some Christians you didn't meet before, and you just felt an instant connection? It's because we share in the same things. Now, there's a challenge involved in this. What kind of people do you draw the closest to? Are they people that are not concerned with the Lord's things? Are they people that mock the Lord's things? You can learn a lot about yourself based on who you want to be around, based on the kind of people you want to draw near to, because it says something about the mutual interests. Notice something else, though, about the core of friendship is that friendship is unique to family. This may seem like an odd point, but it's one of the things that Proverbs brings up several times, that friendship is offering you something that family cannot always offer you. Look at Proverbs 27, verse 10, the second half. "Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away." Now, in this case, could be that it's, brothers that are physically distant from each other, which is not uncommon in our culture today. I don't live near my brother. He lives in Iowa, and so we're not close physically to each other. But I've got a lot of brothers here that are nearer to me geographically, and therefore can have more practical support in my life if there's something going on. But notice this passage, Proverbs 17:17. "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." We all know how this works, where some kind of family crisis happens, and your brother will fly across the country to see you and be there for you. It's kind of like your brother is a backup in extreme cases, but in this same passage, there's a friend who loves at all times. Think about David. David had, was it 7 brothers, or he was the 7th brother? He had a lot of siblings. He had a lot of brothers. And we all have a hard time remembering David's brothers' names, but who do we couple David with besides Bathsheba? Jonathan. Because he was loving him at all times. His brothers weren't there for him all the time, but Jonathan was there for him all the time. And what we learn from passages like this, we'll look at another one in just a moment, but we learn from this is that friendship is a choice. It's a mutual pursuit, and it's not born out of obligation of, well, you're my brother or you're my sister, so I have to be here for you or have to do this for you. There is something that friendship can bring into your life that your family cannot give you. Now, it would be great if you had a biological sibling that you were also legitimately close friends with, but not everybody gets that luxury. So in Christ, we have friends that love at all times. Now, notice another thing. Friendship is a rare thing. Loneliness has become, I had somebody just text me send me a message a couple days ago talking about how lonely he is, and he doesn't live around here, and kind of what to do about that sort of thing. Do you know that there's different countries now that have ministers of loneliness? Japan does now. The UK, I think, was the first one to have a governmental person that does something about loneliness. I don't know what they do. Do they go and hang out with people that are, I don't know. But there's some research that's been done that says this: the average person in America has between 3 and 5 close friends. According to this survey, almost half report having 3 or fewer close friends. You can be around a lot of people and still feel lonely, because to feel lonely is to feel unloved. Look at Proverbs 18:24. "A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Isn't this like The Great Gatsby or something? This guy that looks like everybody loves him, and he's got all kinds. You can have 5,000 Facebook friends, and once you get above 5,000, you have to have like your own page or something. You could have 5,000 Facebook friends. You can look like you're so popular and so important, but as soon as something happens in your life that where you come to ruin or you're in need, you might find a friend, one person, who sticks closer than a brother. Have you ever had something like that happen? Where you thought you had a lot of friends, and then something really bad happened to you, and there was only like one person there. Friendship is rare. And now, the point of this passage in Proverbs 18:24 isn't to bemoan that, all of these people were fake. The point, I think, at least the thrust of this passage is be really thankful for that one person that was there for you. If you are somebody who can say, I've got 3 or 5 close friends, or at least I have one good friend, let that person know how much they mean to you, because you have something that's very rare. These are some things that Proverbs would help us understand is what friendship is. But let's finish this lesson by thinking about the foundations of friendship, or the building blocks of friendship. I remember when I went to preschool, my mom would drop me off at this preschool when I was 5 or whatever it was. And my mom would tell me before I ever went, she always told me, you have to make friends, you have to make friends. But nobody ever told me what that meant, so I literally thought for a while that I had to go take Play-Doh or clay and make little people out of it. So I don't know if there was ever a time where I was trying to make a little friend and somebody wanted to be my friend, and I said, leave me alone, I'm trying to make friends right now. But what are the building blocks to actually accomplishing this? Because sometimes we might wish, I wish I had a friend, and we never ask ourselves the question, am I being a good friend to somebody? I wish I could make all of these start with the same letter, and I almost did, but I failed. But the first one is constancy. Again, Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times. They're always going to be there for you. But this seems like it contradicts Proverbs 25, verse 17. Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. Have you ever seen that happen before? The kind of person that never knows when to leave, the kind of person that never knows when to stop texting you, the kind of and you're like, it's like a Chihuahua dog. You're like, and you're like, what does it mean a friend loves at all times? Whatever it means, it's not this guy that doesn't understand boundaries. A friend that loves at all times is always available for you. They're always there for you. If you have need, if you need wisdom, if you need companionship, if you need encouragement, if you just need somebody to spend a day with, they're there for you when it's needed, which would also involve in hardship. Do you have somebody that's consistently there for you, that has constancy in your life? You know that you could always text them or call you, and they're going to get back to you, and they're going to help you in some way. That's one of the things that a good friend would do. Ask yourself this question: are you that kind of person for somebody? Here's another building block, is that you are considerate. All of us have known people that we might describe as being inconsiderate, and we don't like being around those people. They kind of run roughshod over your feelings. They say insensitive things. People who are considerate understand your weaknesses and where you're coming from, and they can read your emotions. Look at Proverbs 27, verse 14. Whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice rising early in the morning will be counted as cursing. When I was in college, I lived off campus, and there was this shuttle bus that would start picking up everybody at like 5 a.m. And there was times where I had to get onto this shuttle bus at like 5:30 a.m. or 6 or whatever. And every time this guy opened up the door, every time, he would go, "Good morning, so good to see you." And I would say, yeah. And then I would sit down, And it happened every day. So eventually I sat up right next to him and I said, "Sir, can I just ask you a question?" And he said, "Yeah, what's going on?" And I said, "I just want to know, why are you so happy like this in the morning?" And he grinned and he said, "There's no better way to make people mad than to be really happy in the morning." I was like, what is wrong with this guy? Why are you like that? Have you ever had somebody wake you up in like overjoyed, like jovial kind of way, and it's just really inconsiderate? I'm never going to go camping with that guy again. Look at this one. Proverbs 25, verse 20, "Whoever sings songs to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day and like vinegar on soda." Don't you just hate it when vinegar's on soda? I hate it when that happens. Have you ever had a time before where you were really struggling with something and somebody just didn't want the bad vibes and they kind of liked it when you were just, happy all the time? And so they just said like, "Oh, just be joyful in the Lord and just turn this off because I don't want to have to deal with the heaviness of what you're going through right now." That's an inconsiderate kind of thing. A good friend is somebody who understands what is going on in your life. They understand the pain that you're going through, and they know how to match and not say things that won't resonate with what you need at the time. Doesn't mean that they won't challenge you, because the next thing is that they're going to be candid. Good friends will tell you truths that you need to hear. This goes back to iron sharpening iron, but look at Proverbs 27, verse 6. "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy." Here's two options in this passage. Would you want your enemy to always tell you how great you were, so you had a superficial sense of how you're doing? Or would you have a good friend who's willing to wound you and tell you something that you needed to hear so that it could propel you into growth? I just thought of some statements that we could maybe ask yourself. Do you ever hear things like this, or do you ever say things like this? "I've noticed you've been speaking harshly to others. I think it's damaging your relationships, and I want to help you work through it." Or, "I don't think this relationship is healthy for you, and I'm worried where it's leading." Or, "You told me you wanted to grow in your prayer life, but it doesn't seem like you're prioritizing it. How can I support you?" Or, "How you handled that could have been better. Would you want to know how to improve next time?" Do you have friends who are willing to say things like that? Are you the kind of person that's willing to do that for other people? People pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to a doctor, and then they knock you out, and he takes a knife to you. Like they'll take a knife and cut open your belly, and then they'll wound you, and you're paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars through your insurance to cut you and hurt you, right? No, not really, because those wounds are faithful wounds to extract cancer, to extract things that shouldn't be in your life. We value people that do that, and we pay them lots of money. Do you have friends like that you treasure and value? Here's the last thing. I wish I could make it start with a C, but friends are dependable. Proverbs 11, verse 13. "Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered." A good friend is dependable because you might open up and tell them something that's really vulnerable. You might say something that's happened in your past. You might say something that you're really wrestling and struggling with. And you know that it's going to stay between you and that person, or if they do tell somebody else, it's somebody that could help do something about the situation. Have you ever had a time before where you opened up your heart to somebody and then they went and told everybody about it and you thought it was going to be safe with that person? A good friend is dependable. You know that it's going to stay between you, them, and the fence post. Here, look at another passage on this. Proverbs 25:19. "Trusting in a treacherous man in a time of trouble is like a bad tooth or a foot that slips." That's vivid imagery right there. I remember one time when I bit down on it was toast, and one of my teeth cracked. This was like 15 years ago or something. And then you don't want to bite down again because you kind of have like PTSD from is that going to happen to another tooth or something? Have you ever had something like that happen before? where you had a time of trouble and you trusted in a treacherous person, and they weren't there for you, they weren't dependable. It's like a foot that slips. You ever gone hiking before and you forgot to bring your walking stick or something, and your foot, you don't have new enough shoes that have good grip on them, and so you slip on a rock and bust your knee open or something? Trusting in a treacherous person is like that. They let you down, they hurt you, they're not dependable. You could look at all of these different foundations for friendships, and all of us would say, I wish I had a friend like that. Ask yourself the question, are you this kind of person for anybody? And I believe that if we become these kinds of people for other people, we will at the same time find ourselves having more friends. At the same time, I would say that all of us already have a friend that's like this. Jesus, when he spoke to the apostles, in John 14, verses 14 and 15 said this, "You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you." You see how all of Jesus and the apostles are friends. We've got the same mission. We're trying to expand the kingdom of God. We got some things in common here, and he's willing to say some things that are hard for people to hear. He's there and available for us. Whenever we need help, we can go to the throne of grace in our time of need in Hebrews. He's somebody who's dependable. He's somebody that tells us things that we need to hear. All of us have a friend like this already. Take some time this week and ask yourself what kinds of friends you're walking with and what that says about you. And ask yourself if you're drawing near to Jesus and if you embrace him as a friend. We're going to sing this song, "Bring Christ Your Broken Life." He's there for you. He'll help. He'll tell you the words that you need to hear. He'll say it in a way that's helpful, in a way that is mixed with grace and hope, because he can transform your life. You see all of those things in the Scripture. If there's anything that we can do for you this morning, this is an opportunity for us to draw near to God and draw near to one another at the same time. And Lord willing, once a month, we'll be looking at more concepts dealing with one another. Thank you for your good attention, but if there's anything that we can do for you, please come forward while we stand and sing.